Hi, my name is Ruth Shepherdson, and this lesson is regarding livestock terminology. As we study animal science, we want to make sure that we are accurate in our terminology so that we are calling animals by the correct names. It's been a problem throughout the history of agriculture that many cultures, many lifestyles, many subgroups have different names for animals, and so sometimes that creates some problems. I would like for you to know the basic terms and be able to use them correctly. We will focus in on 5 different species of animals: cattle, sheep, swine, poultry, and horses. Those are the most common for our area. You will find some congruencies, though, with other species. For example, the terminology for swine is very similar to the terminology for bears, which are also found wild in our area. The terminology for goats is oftentimes very similar to sheep, with the exception of the interchange of ewe for doe. So we look at all sorts of different terminologies and continue to grow our knowledge as we study. We'll start with the cattle industry. When cattle give birth, we call the process calving. You can see in the top right-hand picture that cattle typically calve alone. They have a gestation period of 283 days, and depending on where you are in the United States, the history of kind of production in that area, the environment, the geography determines whether they're calving indoors or outdoors, and whether they're calving in the fall or the spring or the winter. So we see a lot of diversity there. That newborn animal is called a calf. Calves eat primarily or drink primarily milk for the first chunk of their life, and then as their digestive system grows and changes, they transition over to forage, much like their mothers. When we look at a young male animal, we term it a bull, and a young female is called a heifer. A heifer is called a heifer until she has her first calf. When the male animal is mature, we call it a bull. So sometimes to differentiate between those two, you might hear ranchers talk about a yearling bull, which would mean they're about a year old, or a mature bull. We also begin then to call a heifer who has had a calf a cow. In the US, many times people will drive by and say, oh, there's a herd of cows. And that's technically the incorrect use of the term, because there may be one bull and 5 cows with their calves in there. But the term cow is sometimes used interchangeably with cattle. I would prefer in this class that you use the term cow to mean a mature female breeding animal. A castrated male animal is called a steer. Within animal agriculture in the United States, we typically castrate animals for 3 reasons. The first would be because there are some individuals we do not want to breed. So not every male born should become breeding stock, and as a result of that, castration is used to limit those genetics from being spread. Castration is usually done when the animal is young, and at that point, we decide which animals contain those superior genetics that we want to pass on to future generations on the farm or ranch. The second reason we might castrate males is to manage aggression and to ensure the safety of the people working with the animals. When testosterone is coursing through an intact male's body, typically we see more aggressive behaviors in regards to protecting the females in their band and to fighting with other males, so that aggression can be minimized when animals are castrated. The third and final reason we castrate animals in the U.S. has to do with meat science. The more testosterone there is in a male's body, the more tough and fibrous and twisted those muscle fibers get. Therefore, usually an intact male, when harvested, would have much tougher, coarser meat quality than a castrated male. So, a large amount of those premium cuts come off of steers. That in part is because of their younger age, and we want to ensure the tenderness of that meat. Lots of factors come into play, but those are the 3 main reasons we castrate male animals in animal agriculture. The next species we're going to look at is sheep. I like that this picture on the slide here that says sheep because it contains two lambs, and it always reminds me of the adage that an old rancher told me one time. He said, you need those ewes to have twins because the second baby is your payday. And I always thought that was a weird comment until he explained himself. He said that within the sheep industry, it takes about one lamb per year when sold to pay for the upkeep of the ewe. So the production manager is really thinking about how can I provide the feed, be it pasture, be it hay, be it grain for my ewes to continue having them in production. It takes selling one lamb a year just to keep that ewe in production. However, the second lamb, if she has twins, becomes your profit. When that lamb is sold, the ewe's upkeep is already paid for, so that second lamb per ewe can be profit, and the enterprise can actually make a profit. So every time I see a picture of ewes with lambs, I think about that old adage. When sheep give birth, we call the process lambing, and the newborn animal is a lamb. A young male and a mature male in the sheep livestock arena are both called rams. You can also use the term buck if you'd like. A young female is called a ewe, as is a mature female. We always have to laugh about how the word ewe is spelled, and I have a couple younger ag students that call them ooies so that they could remember how to spell them on the quiz. A mature male that is intact is a ram. A mature female is again a ewe, and that castrated male is called a wether. In the swine industry, we look at a different type of reproduction because swine have litters. And so we see higher numbers of animals being born per female. It's a cute picture of a litter of piglets. When swine give birth, we call the process farrowing, and the newborn animal is called a piglet. The young male animal is called a boar, and the young female animal is called a gilt. Lots of people have a hard time remembering the term gilt. It's not a super common one. We only call a gilt until they have their first litter of piglets. I always tell students to remember the term gilt because it starts with a G, and so does the word girl. So a young female in the human species is a girl. A young female in the swine species is a gilt. Moving on to mature males, we term that mature male the same as an immature male, a boar. The mature female is a sow, and the castrated male is a barrow. Within the pig industry, it's pretty well known to be careful of aggression in both intact males and mature females who have just had a litter of piglets. Sows and really any intact female that has just had babies are very protective of their young. Pigs are of a special concern or care because they're omnivores. They will consume both meat and plants, and so we want to make sure that humans don't have exposed sores or things like that when they get in the pen with an intact male or female. Next, we'll move on to horses. Horses, we study the terms. We look at them a little bit differently because in the U.S. they are typically not a meat product. They are in many places of the world. It's actually really interesting to research the cultural differences between which cultures consume which animals and why. Horses are a good source of protein for the cultures who do consume them, just as some cultures don't consume cattle and we do. As you study culture around the world, you'll begin to notice some of those discrepancies in food. When horses give birth, we call the process foaling, and the newborn animal is called a foal. That young male animal is called a colt, and the female animal is called a filly. As those two animals become mature and of breeding age, the mature male is a stallion and the mature female is a mare. Many people also use the term stud in place of stallion, particularly in the western states. A castrated male horse is called a gelding. In horses that we are not castrating them necessarily for muscle purposes, but many times for management purposes. Finally, let's look at the species of chickens. Chickens have undergone a lot of genetic change throughout the years, and we'll talk about some of those as we go through the different species of chickens. When a chicken gives birth, we call that process either laying or hatching. I don't care which term you use. That really depends on whether you believe life begins at fertilization or when the animal takes their first breath. A newborn animal, regardless, is called a chick. Chicks hatch out of eggs after about a 25-day incubation period. A young male chicken is called a cockerel, and a young female chicken is called a pullet. When we look at the terms associated with chickens, we actually go back to the Old English language. And I had a great conversation with my daughter about this when she was reading Dr. Dolittle. In Old England, or in Old English, they oftentimes would call a mature male animal a cock and a young male a cockerel. The term cockerel is still pretty widely accepted. However, in modern day America, the term cock has kind of been made derogatory. And so we prefer the term rooster in this class. The term cock is scientifically appropriate. However, if you get caught calling your friend that in the hall, I doubt that the principal is going to feel like you cared much about scientific theory. So we'll go with the young male term being cockerel. A young female is a pullet. Now, as that pullet ages, she becomes a hen, and we usually call a mature male chicken a rooster. I have this theory in life that almost every person I know has a story about a mean rooster. Roosters can be pretty aggressive. There are a couple of things they do that can be hard for humans to tolerate. The first is that they have spurs on the back of their legs. Those spurs get pretty hard and pretty sharp. And they kind of use them as a weapon. And so many times if a rooster attacks, they'll actually be trying to get their feet up to stab whatever they're attacking with the spurs. We had a mean rooster one time that kind of flopped around and jumped at my son's head trying to spur him in the eyes because he saw him as scary and challenging, and he was a really terrible rooster. So roosters oftentimes are not kept in a herd of chickens that are just there for laying eggs and things like that because of management issues. A castrated male chicken is called a capon or a capone. I've heard it pronounced both ways. Castrated male chickens are not very common anymore, and that's because of the genetic changes we've made to chickens. Used to be that we castrated male chickens for meat science purposes. And so even here in Plateau Valley, they used to actually, almost every family would raise nearly 100 broiler chickens a year. And those broiler chickens would be purposed for meat production, not for egg laying. At the end of about 12 weeks, they would butcher them all and sell them or freeze them or what have you. Chickens begin to show traits of sex at about 7 or 8 weeks, usually 8 weeks. And so at about 8 weeks, the roosters would get kind of stringy meat. They would begin learning how to crow. They began getting aggressive. Genetically, over the years, that's been changed. And they've actually kind of changed some varieties of chickens and come up with one that's premium for roasting, and that chicken is hatched to harvest ready in 8 weeks. So what it means is that it doesn't matter whether the chick is a female or male, because they're not going to begin to show those sex traits until about the time they're harvested. The meat's not going to get real tough, things like that. So we don't usually castrate male chickens anymore. Instead, we use those varieties for meat production that don't have testosterone coursing through the body until after their lifespan is expected to be over. So we do still want you to know the term capon, but know that castrating chickens is not real common. In closing, after this terminology, I want to begin to expose you to this idea of a breed. So animal genetics are a huge industry in American agriculture, and the genetic changes we've made to animals over the years, for the most part, have been really important in making agriculture more efficient. A breed is any animal that's been selected for and through breeding has come to resemble one another. they pass their traits on uniformly to their offspring. So as we study each of these species for a day or two in the next few units, you're going to learn a few breeds in each of those species. Have a great day. Thanks for working hard.